The pen felt heavier than it should. Adaeze Okonkwo stared at the documents spread across the mahogany table, her father's company reduced to 14 pages of legal jargon and a signature line. Across from her, Kang Ji-Hoon sat motionless, his sharp jawline catching the sole afternoon light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd entered the room. Not during the introductions. Not during the lawyer's explanations. Not even when the merger terms revealed she would become his wife within 72 hours. But she noticed his hand, the left one, resting beside his own unsigned contract. The sleeve of his charcoal suit had shifted, exposing the edge of a tattoo on his inner wrist. Geometric patterns. African. Korean. Intertwined. She didn't understand it. She didn't understand any of this. Then his attorney slid another folder across the table, one that hadn't been in the original documents, and Adaeze caught a name on the tab before it was covered. Her dead father's name. Ji-Hoon's eyes finally lifted. Cold. Knowing. Like he'd been waiting for her to see it. Stay with me, because this story will not let you go. Like, share and subscribe, and comment I stayed so I know my real ones are watching. 72 hours earlier. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Lagos time. Adaeze had been asleep for exactly 43 minutes, her first real rest in 6 days, when her phone shattered the silence. She reached for it blindly, knocking over the stack of financial reports that had become her permanent bedside companions. Miss Okonkwo. The voice was Korean accented, formal, and utterly unfamiliar. My name is Secretary Yoon. I represent Kong Industries, Seoul. We have a proposal regarding your family's company. She sat up slowly, the fog of exhaustion clearing into something sharper. It's nearly 4 in the morning. Apologies. Mr. Kang Ji-Hoon prefers to conduct initial discussions outside business hours. Fewer listeners. Adaze's grip tightened on the phone. Kong Industries. She knew the name. Everyone in the African manufacturing sector knew it. The Korean conglomerate had been quietly acquiring supply chain companies across the continent for 3 years, always struggling ones, always at basement prices. Always leaving the original owners with nothing. We're not for sale. With respect, Miss Okonkwo, your company filed for emergency creditor protection 9 days ago. Your father's death left considerable debt that was previously hidden from the board. You're 3 weeks from complete liquidation. The words hit like physical blows. She hadn't told anyone about the creditor filing. Not her mother. Not her younger brother Tabena, who was supposed to graduate from university next month. Not even her CFO knew the full extent of what she discovered in her father's private accounts after the funeral. How do you know that? Mr. Kong knows many things. A pause. He also knows solutions. He's prepared to clear all outstanding debts, inject $40 million in operating capital, and guarantee your family retains 30% ownership. Adaze's heart stopped. That was impossible. That was salvation. That was everything she'd been desperately trying to find for 6 months. In exchange for what? The silence stretched for 3 seconds too long. A marriage, Miss Okonkwo. To Mr. Kong himself. For a minimum of 2 years. She laughed. The sound came out harsh and broken, nothing like humor. You're joking. Mr. Kong does not joke. The merger would be structured as a family unification. Korean corporate law provides significant tax advantages for spouse-connected business entities. Publicly, this would be presented as a romantic partnership that predated the business arrangement. Privately, you would be contractual partners. I don't even know what this man looks like. You'll meet him in Seoul. Tomorrow. A car will collect you at 6 p.m. Lagos time. A private jet will be waiting at Murtala Muhammad International. Adaeze threw her legs over the side of the bed, suddenly too agitated to stay still. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. Grounding. Real. This wasn't real. I'm not marrying a stranger to save a company. Then your 467 employees lose their jobs within the month. Your brother's tuition payment, which I understand was due last week, remains unpaid. Your mother's medical treatments at the Lagos University teaching hospital stop when your insurance lapses. And your father's legacy becomes a cautionary tale about Nigerian businessmen who couldn't manage their own finances. The cruelty in the words was precise. Surgical. Like someone had studied exactly which wounds would bleed the most. Who are you people? We're the only offer you're going to receive, Miss Okonkwo. Mr. Kong made certain of that. The line went dead. She told her mother she had an emergency investor meeting. It wasn't entirely a lie. The private jet was obscene, Cream leather seats, actual beds in the back cabin, a flight attendant who spoke perfect Igbo and offered her champagne she couldn't bring herself to drink. Adaeze sat rigid by the window, watching Lagos disappear beneath clouds, wondering if she was flying towards salvation or a very elegant trap. Her phone held exactly one photograph of Kang Ji-Hoon, pulled from a 3-year-old Forbes Korea article. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance without his consent. But even pixelated, certain things were clear. Sharp jawline. Eyes that looked black in the photo but carried something cold behind them. The kind of stillness that came from either absolute control or absolute emptiness. He was 34 in that photo. 36 now. Unmarried, which the article noted as unusual for a chaebol heir of his age and status. His father had died 8 years ago. His mother lived in Switzerland and hadn't been photographed in Korea since 2019. He had a younger sister. He had no scandals. He had, according to the financial section, personally orchestrated 11 major acquisitions in the past 5 years, all successful, all ruthless, all leaving the original companies absorbed beyond recognition. Adaeze stared at his face until her eyes burned. What do you want from me? Why me specifically? What aren't you telling me? The questions had no answers. Only the steady hum of the jet engines and 14 hours of flight time to imagine the worst. She slept for 2 hours somewhere over the Sahara. When she woke, the flight attendant, whose name was Chisholm, who had grown up in Enugu before moving to Seoul for university, was setting down a tray of jollof rice and fried plantain. Mr. Kang requested we stock Nigerian cuisine, Chisholm said quietly. He was very specific about the recipes. Adaeze looked at the food. It smelled exactly like her mother's cooking. How would he know what recipes to request? Something flickered across Chisholm's face. Too fast to name. I wouldn't know, ma'am. I only started this position last week. She left before Adaeze could ask anything else. The jollof rice sat untouched for the rest of the flight. The car that collected her from Incheon was black, silent, and driven by a man who didn't speak once during the 40-minute drive into the city. Seoul passed outside the tinted windows like a fever dream, gleaming towers and ancient temples existing side by side, neon signs she couldn't read, streets so clean they looked digital. It was nothing like Lagos, where chaos was comfort and noise meant life. Here, everything felt controlled. Contained. The car stopped outside a building that seemed to scrape the clouds themselves. 60 stories of black glass and steel, the Kang Industries logo glowing white at the very top. Secretary Yoon was waiting at the entrance. He was older than his voice had suggested, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a face that had clearly never smiled. He bowed exactly 15 degrees when Adaeze stepped out of the car. Miss Okonkwo. Welcome to Seoul. Mr. Kang is waiting in the executive conference room. Please follow me. No small talk. No pleasantries. No acknowledgement that she had just flown 14 hours to discuss marrying a man she'd never met. Adaeze followed. The elevator rose for nearly a full minute. When the doors opened on the 58th floor, she understood immediately that this was a stage. Everything had been arranged for effect, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Seoul's skyline, the single mahogany table positioned to catch the afternoon light, the 2 chairs placed across from each other like opposing chess pieces. And him. Kang Ji-Hoon stood at the window, his back to her. He was taller than the photograph had suggested. Broader in the shoulders. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, and his hands were clasped behind his back in a posture of absolute stillness. He didn't turn when she entered. Leave us, he said. Secretary Yoon disappeared. The door closed with a soft click. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Ji-Hoon remained at the window. Adaeze remained by the door. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then he turned. The photograph hadn't captured it. The coldness. The way his dark eyes seemed to evaluate everything at once. Her posture, her clothes, her exhaustion, her defiance, and find it all expected. You came, he said. His voice was low. Controlled. Not a question. You didn't give me a choice. I gave you exactly one choice. You made it. He gestured toward the table without moving from his position. She sat. He didn't. Instead, Ji-Hoon moved to the opposite side of the table and placed both hands flat on its surface, leaning forward slightly. The posture was deliberate, dominant, overwhelming. She was seated. He was standing. The power imbalance was mathematical. Adaeze refused to look away. The terms are simple, he said. Legal marriage. Minimum 2 years. You will live in my residence here in Seoul. You will attend public functions as my wife. You will present a convincing image of partnership to my board, my shareholders and my family. And in exchange? Full debt clearance for Okonkwo Industries. $40 million in immediate capital injection. Board restructuring that removes the members who have been stealing from your company since your father's death.
Her breath caught. What?
For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not emotion, exactly.
More like confirmation.
You didn't know. He straightened, moving toward a small credenza near the window. Your CFO, Emmanuel Achebe. Your operations director, Folake Bello. Your late father's personal attorney. They've been siphoning approximately $3 million annually through falsified vendor accounts for the past 4 years. He returned to the table with a folder, thick manila, worn at the edges like it had been handled repeatedly.
He placed it in front of her.
Your father discovered it 6 months before he died.
He was building a case against them.
The stress of that discovery, combined with his pre-existing heart condition.
He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to.
Adeeze's hands were shaking as she opened the folder.
Bank statements.
Email records.
Transaction logs.
Her father's handwriting in the margins, careful notes, growing more frantic as the pages progressed. The last entry was dated 2 days before his death.
They know I know. I need to tell Ada.
She needs to be prepared for.
The sentence stopped mid-word.
How do you have this? Her voice came out fractured. Broken in places she didn't know could break. This was my father's private. Your father and I had a business relationship. The words fell like stones.
That's impossible. I would have known.
I handled all his correspondence. You handled the correspondence he wanted you to see. Ji-Hoon's expression remained unchanged. Your father approached me 14 months ago about a potential partnership.
Legitimate.
Mutually beneficial. He wanted to expand into Asian markets. I wanted reliable manufacturing connections in West Africa. We met 3 times in person.
Lagos. Singapore.
Zurich. Adeeze couldn't breathe. Her father had never mentioned any of this. Never hinted at Korean partnerships or secret meetings or international expansion plans. He'd spent the last year of his life telling her the company was stable, that she should focus on her own career, that there would be plenty of time to learn the family business later.
He'd been lying to her. Protecting her.
Dying alone with secrets he couldn't share. The last time I saw your father was in Zurich, Ji-Hoon continued.
He gave me that folder. Asked me to keep it safe.
He said if anything happened to him, I should make sure the truth came out. And I should make sure you were protected from the people who would try to destroy everything he built. So this marriage, her voice cracked.
She forced it steady.
This marriage is you keeping a promise to a dead man? Something shifted in Ji-Hoon's eyes. Something that moved too fast to identify. This marriage is a business arrangement. The promise is separate. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a smaller envelope.
Cream-colored. Unsealed.
Her father's handwriting on the front.
For my Ada.
When she's ready. He asked me to give you this when the time was right.
I believe.
He placed the envelope on the table beside the folder. The time is right. Adeeze stared at her father's handwriting. The familiar loops of the A in her name. The slight slant that had always meant he was tired when he wrote.
She didn't touch it. She couldn't. Not yet.
I need time, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. The marriage paperwork must be filed by noon if we're going to meet the merger deadline.
He moved toward the door.
Secretary Yoon will escort you to your accommodations. Everything you need has been provided. He paused with his hand on the door handle. One more thing.
She looked up.
He had turned slightly, just enough for her to see the edge of his profile.
The sharp line of his jaw.
The controlled tension in his shoulders. The people who hurt your father, who are still hurting your family, they don't know about our arrangement yet. When they find out, they will try to stop it. They will try to stop you. Is that a warning?
It's a fact.
He opened the door. I don't make warnings, Miss Okonkwo. I make preparations.
He left.
The folder and the envelope remained on the table. And Adeeze sat alone in the dying soul light, surrounded by her father's secrets and a stranger's impossible offer. The accommodations were a penthouse suite on the 60th floor.
2 bedrooms. A private kitchen.
A living room with windows that made it feel like floating above the city. Every surface was immaculate, every detail considered. Nigerian art on the walls, actual pieces she recognized from galleries in Lagos. A fully stocked refrigerator with ingredients for egusi soup and pounded yam.
Someone had studied her.
Someone had studied her thoroughly. Adaeze ignored all of it. She sat cross-legged on the master bed, her father's envelope in her hands, and tried to remember how to breathe. The seal broke easily. Inside was a single page, handwritten. The date at the top was 3 weeks before her father died.
My dearest Ada.
If you're reading this, I am no longer there to explain in person. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for many things. I know I told you the company was fine. I know I told you to focus on your own life, your own dreams. I was trying to give you time I didn't realize I didn't have. The truth is, I made mistakes.
Big ones.
I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted, and by the time I realized it, they had already begun taking everything I built. Everything I wanted to leave for you and to Benna and your mother. I've been fighting them in secret.
Building evidence. Preparing a case. But I'm tired, Ada.
My heart is not what it was. And I'm afraid I won't be able to finish this fight. That's why I went to him.
Kang Ji-Hoon.
I know his reputation, cold, ruthless, impossible to read. But I also know things about his family that no one else knows. Things that make me believe he will keep his word. He promised to protect you if anything happens to me. He promised to help you save what I couldn't. I know this isn't fair to ask. I know he's a stranger. But he's a stranger who keeps his promises, and right now, that's the most valuable thing I can give you. There's something else. Something I only recently discovered about Ji-Hoon and our family. I don't have time to explain it fully, but... The letter stopped mid-sentence. A second page, maybe. Lost or never written. Adaeze read the words again. 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 Something about Ji-Hoon and our family. What could her father possibly have discovered? They'd never had Korean business connections before. Her mother's family was from Rivers State. Her father's family was Igbo through and through. There was no link, no connection, nothing that would explain why a Korean chaebol heir would agree to marry a Nigerian woman he'd never met just to keep a promise to her dead father. Unless the promise wasn't just about business. Unless there was something else entirely. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it against her chest.
What were you going to tell me, Papa? What did you find?
The city lights of Seoul sparkled 60 stories below. No answers came.
She didn't sleep.
At 6 a.m., she finally opened her laptop and began researching Kang Ji-Hoon in earnest. Not the Forbes articles. Not the business profiles. The deeper searches, Korean message boards, translated awkwardly through browser extensions. Society pages. Gossip sites. The picture that emerged was contradictory. Publicly, he was exactly what the official profile suggested. Brilliant, ruthless, unemotional. The perfect heir to Korea's fifth-largest conglomerate. He'd taken over at 26 after his father's sudden death and had tripled the company's value in 10 years. But the gossip told different stories. His mother's sudden departure for Switzerland, rumored to be an escape from his father's controlling behavior. A broken engagement at 29 to a woman from another chaebol family, ended by him, without public explanation, 2 weeks before the wedding. The younger sister, Kang Soo-yeon, who appeared at family events looking increasingly thin, increasingly hollow. And then, buried in a 7-year-old forum post, a single line that made Adaeze's blood run cold. They say his father destroyed someone in Lagos back in the 90s.
Some African businessman.
Kang Sr. was trying to expand into West Africa and someone got in his way. The whole thing was covered up, but my cousin who worked at Kang Industries said Ji-Hoon found the records after his father died. He's been trying to fix something ever since.
Lagos. The 90s.
Her father had started his company in 1994. Adaeze grabbed her phone and dialed her mother. It was 10 p.m. in Lagos. Her mother answered on the third ring, her voice heavy with concern.
Ada?
Is everything all right? Benna said you're in Seoul.
Mama, I need you to tell me something.
Did Papa ever have business dealings with Korean companies in the 1990s?
Silence.
The kind of silence that said everything.
Mama. Please.
It was a long time ago. Her mother's voice had changed, smaller now, more guarded.
Before you were born. There was a partnership.
A Korean company wanted to help fund the expansion. Your father was so excited, it would have changed everything.
What happened?
The deal fell through. The Korean company, they withdrew at the last moment. Changed the terms in ways your father couldn't accept. He lost everything he'd invested in the preparation. It nearly bankrupted us before we'd even really begun. What was the company's name?
Another silence.
Longer this time.
Mama.
Kang Industries. The words came out barely above a whisper.
It was Kong Industries, Ada.
They nearly destroyed us before you were even born. Why are you asking about this? Why are you in Seoul?
Ada, tell me what's happening. I'll call you back, Mama. I promise.
I love you. She hung up before her mother could ask more questions. Her hands were shaking again. Kong Industries had tried to destroy her father's company 30 years ago. Now the heir to that same company was offering to save it. This isn't just about keeping a promise, she realized. This is about paying a debt.
But whose debt?
And what exactly was being paid? At 11:30 a.m., Secretary Yoon arrived at her door. Mr. Kong is waiting in the conference room. The documents are prepared.
Adaeze had showered.
Changed into the one business suit she'd packed. Applied makeup carefully enough to hide the evidence of a sleepless night. But inside, she was a live wire of questions and suspicions. She followed Secretary Yoon to the elevator. The conference room looked different in morning light, harder somehow, more clinical. The documents were arranged precisely on the table.
2 sets of contracts. 2 pens.
Ji-Hoon stood at the window again, but this time he turned immediately when she entered. His suit was midnight blue. His expression was exactly as unreadable as yesterday. But today, Adaeze saw his left wrist clearly as his hands came to rest at his sides.
The tattoo.
She'd glimpsed it yesterday, but now she could see its full detail. Geometric patterns in black ink, about 3 inches long. The design incorporated both Korean and African elements, angular lines reminiscent of traditional Igbo uli body art interwoven with shapes she recognized from Korean dancing painting.
It was beautiful.
It was also deeply, impossibly strange. You've been researching, he said.
Not a question. I found forum posts. About your father. About Lagos.
About something that happened in the 1990s. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted.
A tightening. Barely visible.
I assumed you would. Was that part of your plan? Let me find out on my own so you don't have to explain. I don't explain myself to anyone, Miss Okonkwo. But I also don't lie. He moved to the table, picked up one of the folders. My father tried to destroy your father 30 years ago. It was cruel, calculated, and completely unnecessary. A show of power by a man who needed to prove he could crush anyone who challenged him. Your father refused to accept terms that would have made him essentially a servant to Kong Industries. So my father punished him for that refusal. He opened the folder. Inside was an old photograph, grainy, clearly scanned from a physical print.
2 men shaking hands.
One was unmistakably Ji-Hoon's father, younger but with the same cold eyes.
The other.
Is that my father?
Lagos.
1995. The day before the deal collapsed. Ji-Hoon set the photograph on the table. I found this in my father's private files after he died. Along with documentation of exactly how he sabotaged the partnership. He kept records of everyone he destroyed. He was proud of it. Adaeze stared at her father's young face.
He looked hopeful in the photograph. Excited.
He had no idea what was about to happen to him. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what my family did to yours.
And because. He paused.
The first moment of hesitation she'd seen from him. Because I've been trying to find a way to make it right for 8 years. When your father approached me about a legitimate partnership, I thought I'd finally found it. A way to undo what my father did. To give back what was taken. And now he's dead. Now he's dead. And the people who killed him.
No one killed him.
He had a heart attack. Ji-Hoon's eyes met hers.
Cold. Certain.
Emmanuel Achebe has been embezzling from your company for 4 years. Your father discovered it and was preparing to expose him. 3 days before your father planned to present his evidence to the board, someone accessed his private medical records and replaced his heart medication with a placebo. The hospital investigation was buried. I have the documentation.
The room tilted.
Adaeze gripped the edge of the table. You're telling me my father was murdered. I'm telling you that your father's death was not an accident. I'm telling you that the people responsible are still inside your company, still stealing from your family, and will continue to do so until someone stops them. He placed his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. I'm telling you that I can stop them. But only if you sign these papers. Why marriage?
Her voice was raw. Broken in new places.
Why not just help? Why this arrangement? Because they're watching you. Every business contact you make, Every meeting you take, every potential investor you approach, they know about it before you finish speaking. The only way to get you out of their surveillance is to move you somewhere they can't reach. Somewhere they have no power.
Seoul. My house. My company. My protection. He straightened.
They can't touch you here. And while you're here, I can take them apart piece by piece. Everything they stole, every lie they told, every life they ruined, I can expose all of it.
But I need time. 2 years.
That's what the contract specifies.
And then you go home.
Your company restored. Your family protected. Your father's killers in prison where they belong. Adaeze looked at the contracts on the table.
The photographs.
The folder full of her father's secrets. She thought about her mother, alone in Lagos, still grieving. She thought about Tabena, trying to graduate while their world crumbled. She thought about 467 employees who had no idea their livelihoods hung by a thread. She thought about her father's unfinished letter. There's something else. Something I only recently discovered about Ji-Hoon and our family.
He was still hiding something. She was certain of it.
This arrangement, this marriage, this elaborate rescue, it was more than debt repayment, more than a promise to a dead man. But whatever it was, she couldn't figure it out standing here.
She needed time. She needed access.
She needed to be inside his world to understand what was really happening.
She picked up the pen. One condition.
Ji-Hoon's eyebrow rose fractionally. You're not in a position to negotiate. One condition, or I walk away and you spend the rest of your life knowing you failed to keep your promise. Something flickered in his eyes.
The first crack in the ice. What condition? The truth. All of it.
Whatever my father was about to tell me in that letter, whatever he discovered about you and our family, you tell me.
Maybe not today. Maybe not next month.
But before these 2 years are up, you tell me everything. He studied her for a long moment. His expression unreadable, as always. But there was something new in the way he looked at her. Something that might have been respect.
Agreed. She signed the contract. He signed the contract.
And just like that, Adaeze Okonkwo became legally engaged to a stranger who had spent 8 years trying to atone for his father's sins. The wedding was 3 days later.
Small. Private.
Held in a courthouse with Secretary Yoon and a woman named Han Min-ji, Ji-Hoon's personal attorney, as witnesses. Adaeze wore a simple white dress that had appeared in her hotel suite that morning, elegant and expensive and nothing like anything she would have chosen for herself. Ji-Hoon wore a black suit. He spoke his vows in a voice devoid of emotion. She spoke hers wondering if she just made the best or worst decision of her life. The ring he slid onto her finger was platinum.
Simple.
The inside was engraved with something in Korean. What does it say? Until the debt is paid. Not exactly romantic.
But then, this wasn't a romance. It was a contract. An arrangement.
A 2-year performance designed to protect her family and destroy their enemies. She needed to remember that. His house was not what she expected. She had imagined something cold.
Modern.
All glass and steel like the Kong Industries building. Instead, the car drove them to a traditional Korean Hanok estate on the outskirts of Seoul. Wooden architecture, curved roof lines, a courtyard garden that looked like something from a historical drama. The property was surrounded by high walls and security cameras, but once inside, it felt almost peaceful. This was my grandmother's house, Ji-Hoon said as they stepped into the main hall. The company headquarters were my father's domain.
This is mine.
Adaeze looked around slowly. The interior was warm wood and paper screens, antique furniture mixed with carefully placed modern conveniences.
It felt lived in. Real. Human.
Nothing like the man who owned it. Your room is in the east wing, he continued.
Private entrance to the garden.
Separate bathroom. If you need anything, the house staff will assist you.
My room.
We have separate bedrooms, Miss Okonkwo.
This is a business arrangement. I don't expect, he stopped.
The first time she'd heard him not finish a sentence. I don't presume. It's Mrs. Kong now, isn't it? Or do you address all your wives by their maiden names? Something flickered across his face. Almost a reaction.
Adaeze then. If you prefer.
I prefer honesty. But I'll settle for my name. She moved past him, following the hall toward what she assumed was the east wing. She could feel his eyes on her back, that cold evaluating gaze that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing.
Adaeze.
She stopped but didn't turn. Welcome home. The words sounded strange in his voice. Like he wasn't sure how to say them. Like he'd never had reason to say them before.
She kept walking. Her room was beautiful.
A traditional ondal floor covered with heated stone, a low bed frame with silk bedding, windows that looked out onto a private section of the garden. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the writing desk, orchids, she noted, not roses. Her suitcase from the hotel had already been unpacked, her clothes hung neatly in a closet that smelled of cedar. She sat on the bed and called her mother.
"It's done, Mama.
I'm married." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with everything her mother couldn't say.
"Are you safe?" "I'm safe."
Is he kind to you? Adaeze thought about Ji-Hoon's cold eyes.
His controlled voice.
The way he'd told her about her father's murder, like he was reading a financial report.
He's fair.
That's enough for now. Her mother began to cry, soft, muffled sounds she was clearly trying to hide.
"Mama, don't."
"This is a good thing. The company will be saved. Tabena's tuition is covered. Your treatments will continue. Everything will be fine. You shouldn't have to sacrifice yourself for us, Ada. Your father would never have wanted. Papa wanted this." She said it more firmly than she felt.
"He went to Ji-Hoon himself, Mama.
He asked for this arrangement. He wanted me protected."
More silence.
More muffled tears. "I'll call you tomorrow. I love you." She hung up before she started crying too.
The house was quiet at night. Too quiet.
Adaeze was used to Lagos, the constant hum of generators, the calls of night birds, the distant sounds of traffic that never fully stopped. Here, there was only silence and the occasional whisper of wind through the garden.
She couldn't sleep.
At midnight, she wrapped herself in a robe she found in the closet, silk, expensive, exactly her size, and slipped out into the garden.
The night air was cool.
The garden was even more beautiful in moonlight, stone pathways winding between carefully shaped trees, a small pond reflecting the stars. She walked slowly, letting her feet guide her, trying not to think about everything that had changed in the past 72 hours.
She was married. To a stranger. In a foreign country.
Her father had been murdered. The people responsible were still free, still stealing, still. You should be asleep.
She spun around.
Ji-Hoon stood on the pathway behind her, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark pants. His feet were bare against the stones. Without the armor of his suits, he looked almost ordinary.
Almost.
His left wrist was clearly visible now. The tattoo seemed to move in the moonlight.
"I couldn't sleep," she said.
"Neither could I." They stood in silence for a moment. The garden breathing around them. The moon casting silver shadows across his face. "Why that tattoo?" She gestured toward his wrist.
"The design. It's African. Korean. Combined."
He looked down at his wrist like he'd forgotten the tattoo was there.
A reminder. Of what?
His eyes lifted to hers.
In the moonlight, they didn't look cold anymore. They looked tired.
Sad perhaps, in a way he would never admit. Of the cost of my father's choices. And the debt I inherited. He turned and walked back toward the house before she could ask more questions.
But at the doorway he paused.
"Breakfast is at 7. My sister will be joining us. I should warn you, she doesn't know yet. About the arrangement.
About any of it.
What does she think this marriage is?" His back was to her.
His voice was flat.
"She thinks I finally fell in love. I suggest you let her keep believing that." He disappeared inside. Adaeze remained in the garden until the cold forced her back to her room. Sleep, when it finally came, was filled with dreams of her father's handwriting and a stranger's cold eyes. Kang Soo-yeon arrived at precisely 7 a.m. She was nothing like her brother. Where Ji-Hoon was controlled and cold, Soo-yeon was all energy and emotion. She burst through the front door like a small hurricane, her expensive handbag swinging, her designer heels clicking against the wooden floor.
"Appa."
She threw her arms around Ji-Hoon's rigid form. "You actually did it. You actually got married without telling anyone, and I had to find out from Secretary Yoon like I'm some stranger."
"Soo-yeon. Breathe."
"I am breathing. I'm breathing and I'm furious and I'm..." She spotted Adaeze in the doorway of the dining room.
"Oh." The hurricane stopped.
Soo-yeon was beautiful in the way wealthy Korean women often were. Flawless skin, perfect makeup, expertly styled hair. But underneath the polish, Adaeze could see what the gossip sites had hinted at. The woman was thin in a way that spoke of missed meals rather than dieting. Her smile was bright but her eyes were shadowed. "You must be the wife." Soo-yeon moved toward her, heels clicking. The mysterious Nigerian businesswoman who somehow convinced my ice block of a brother to actually feel something. She stopped directly in front of Adaeze, examining her with unabashed curiosity. You're beautiful. I assumed you would be. Ji-Hoon has standards in all things, but still. Really quite stunning.
Thank you.
Adaeze managed to smile.
You're very kind.
I'm not kind at all. I'm nosy and intrusive, and I have absolutely no respect for personal boundaries. Soo-Yun linked her arm through Adaeze like they'd known each other for years.
Now. Tell me everything. How did you meet? When did he propose?
Was it romantic, or did he somehow make a marriage proposal sound like a business acquisition?
Soo-Yun.
Ji-Hoon's voice was sharp.
What?
I deserve details. You've been alone for years, refusing every match the family suggested, and then suddenly I get a text from Yoon saying you're married? No warning, no explanation, just. We met through our fathers. Adaeze said it calmly, smoothly, the lie coming easier than she expected. My father and Ji-Hoon had a business relationship. After my father passed, Ji-Hoon reached out to offer condolences. We began talking. Things developed from there. She glanced at Ji-Hoon as she spoke. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but something in his eyes, approval? Warning. Flickered briefly. That's actually almost sweet. Soo-Yun sounded suspicious.
Too sweet for my brother.
Are you sure he didn't just present you with a contract and a pen?
Soo-Yun. Fine, fine.
Keep your secrets. She released Adaeze's arm and moved toward the dining room. But I expect a full interrogation over breakfast. Sister-in-law privileges. She disappeared into the dining room, already calling for the staff to bring extra side dishes. Ji-Hoon stepped closer to Adaeze. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something subtle, woody, unexpectedly warm. You handled that well, he said quietly. I told you I would sell the performance. That wasn't a performance. He moved past her toward the dining room. That was a test.
Did I pass?
He paused in the doorway, not quite looking at her. My sister is observant. She's been watching me for signs of weakness since our father died. If she suspected this arrangement was fake, she would report it to our uncle within hours.
Your uncle? Kang Ji-Hoon.
My father's younger brother. He's been trying to take control of the company since the day my father died. A fake marriage would give him exactly the ammunition he needs. Adaeze felt cold suddenly. You didn't mention this before. I'm mentioning it now. He finally met her eyes. Soo-Yun isn't the only one watching, Adaeze. From this moment forward, we're never truly alone. Remember that. He entered the dining room. Adaeze took a breath, steadied herself, and followed. The performance had officially begun. 3 weeks into the marriage, they attended their first public event together. The Kang Industries annual shareholders gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Shilasol, all crystal chandeliers and gilt trim and people who looked like they'd never worried about money a day in their lives. Adaeze wore a custom gown that had arrived from a designer she'd never heard of, midnight blue silk that made her dark skin glow.
Ji-Hoon wore a tuxedo.
They had practiced their entrance 3 times. Remember, he'd said earlier that evening, adjusting her necklace with impersonal efficiency, my uncle will approach you before the first course is served. He'll compliment you, test your Korean, and try to find inconsistencies in our story. He's been doing this to my business partners for 20 years. And if I make a mistake? Then he'll know this marriage is a strategy rather than a choice. And he'll start looking for ways to use that against both of us. The necklace he'd adjusted was heavy. Platinum and diamonds. Borrowed from his grandmother's collection. No pressure, she'd said dryly.
He'd almost smiled. Almost.
Kang Ji-Hoon found her exactly when Ji-Hoon predicted. He was a smaller man than she expected, perhaps 5'7", with a round face and the kind of perpetual smile that never reached his eyes. He approached while Ji-Hoon was briefly occupied with a group of board members, materializing at Adaeze's elbow like he'd been waiting for exactly this opportunity.
Mrs. Kang.
He bowed slightly. What a pleasure to finally meet you. His Korean was formal, old-fashioned. His English, when he switched to it, was fluent but accented. Please let me say, you are even more beautiful than the photograph suggested. My nephew has excellent taste.
Thank you.
She kept her voice warm but guarded. Ji-Hoon speaks very highly of his family.
Does he?
Something flickered in Dae-Young's smile. My nephew rarely speaks highly of anyone. That he speaks of you at all is noteworthy. We prefer actions to words in our family. The Nigerian family, you mean?
The shift was subtle. A test.
The Okonkwo family, yes. But also the Kang family now. She met his eyes steadily. I take my marriage vows seriously.
How refreshing.
The young people these days, they treat marriage like a contract to be renegotiated whenever convenient. It's reassuring to meet someone who still understands the value of commitment. I understand many values, Mr. Kang.
Loyalty. Honor.
The importance of protecting those who depend on you. Something shifted in his expression. The smile remained, but beneath it, calculation.
Reassessment. Your father was a businessman, I understand. Mining operations?
Manufacturing. Manufacturing. Building materials primarily. We supply construction projects across West Africa.
And he left you this company?
A young woman alone, managing hundreds of employees in such a difficult industry.
Here it comes, she thought.
My father believed capability was not determined by gender. As does my husband.
Of course, of course.
Dae-young waved a hand dismissively.
I meant no disrespect.
I simply find it interesting that my nephew, who has refused every marriage arrangement we've suggested for the past decade, suddenly chose to bind himself to a woman he barely knows. A woman whose company, if you'll forgive me, was in considerable financial distress. The distress was temporary. The union is not.
Indeed. His smile widened. Well,
I do hope you'll find happiness here, Mrs. Kang. Seoul can be challenging for outsiders. The social rules are not always obvious. The consequences of breaking them are not always clear.
He leaned slightly closer, dropping his voice.
If you ever need guidance, advice from someone who has watched this family for decades, my door is always open. It can be difficult, navigating my nephew's expectations. He is not an easy man to please. I've never been interested in easy, Mr. Kang.
She smiled sweetly.
If you'll excuse me, my husband is looking for me. She walked away without waiting for his response. Ji-Hoon appeared at her side before she'd taken 10 steps, his hand settling on the small of her back. The touch was light but present.
Deliberate. A message.
You handled that well, he murmured. He's exactly as charming and horrible as you described. He's also watching us right now. Keep smiling.
She smiled.
I think he suspects something. He suspects everyone of everything. That's how he survived this long. Ji-Hoon guided her toward the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. Which is why we need to give him something more convincing to watch.
What do you? He pulled her into his arms. The music swelled.
And before she could process what was happening, Adaeze found herself being waltzed across the ballroom floor by a man she was supposed to hate, surrounded by strangers who were supposed to believe she loved him. His hand was warm against her back. His eyes never left her face.
You're stiff, he said quietly. Relax. Let me lead.
I don't like being led.
I'm aware.
Something flickered in his expression. Something that might have been amusement. Consider it practice. There will be many situations where we need to present a unified front. Is that what this is?
Practice.
This is survival. He spun her, smoothly, expertly. My uncle is watching. 3 board members who report to him are watching. The journalist from Korea Economic Daily is watching. Every person in this room is making calculations about our marriage and what it means for the company's future. And what should they calculate?
He pulled her closer.
Close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body through his tuxedo jacket. Close enough to see the individual stitches of the geometric tattoo curling around his wrist. That I would burn down everything I've built before I let anyone threaten what's mine.
His voice was low. Intense.
And for a moment, just a moment, it didn't sound like a performance at all.
The music ended.
He released her slowly, his hands lingering at her waist for exactly the right amount of time.
Smile, he said. They're applauding. She smiled. The room applauded.
And somewhere in the crowd, Kang Dae-young watched them with eyes that missed nothing. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the dance.
Not the steps. Not the audience.
Not even the conversation. Just the warmth of his hands. The intensity in his eyes. The way he'd said what's mine like he meant it. It's an act, she reminded herself. Everything he does is calculated. Strategic. Don't forget that. But at 2 a.m., when sleep continued to elude her, she found herself in the garden again.
And so did he. They didn't speak at first.
Just stood on opposite sides of the small pond, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. "You're not sleeping again," he said eventually. "Neither are you." "I rarely sleep well."
"Old habit."
She moved toward a stone bench near the water's edge.
After a moment, he followed.
They sat on opposite ends, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to maintain the careful distance they'd established. "Can I ask you something?" He inclined his head.
"The tattoo."
"You said it was a reminder of your father's choices. What choices specifically?" He was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "My father was not a good man." The words came slowly, like he was choosing each one carefully. He built an empire on the destruction of others. He used people, discarded them, never considered the consequences. He believed power was the only thing that mattered, and he raised me to believe the same. "But you don't believe that anymore?" "I believe power matters." His eyes found hers. "But I also believe there are things worth more than power.
Things worth protecting. Things worth atoning for.
Like your promise to my father."
Among others.
"What others?"
He stood abruptly.
The conversation was over.
"Get some sleep, Adaeze.
Tomorrow we meet with the board to finalize the merger details. You'll need to be sharp." He walked back toward the house.
"You didn't answer my question," she called after him. He paused at the door. "Not yet. But I will." He disappeared inside.
Adaeze remained on the bench until the cold seeped into her bones, thinking about a man made of ice who spoke of atonement like he understood what it cost. She met the woman at the board meeting. Cha Yuna arrived late, a deliberate entrance, clearly designed for maximum impact. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a cream suit that probably cost more than Adaeze's monthly salary back in Lagos. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun.
Her makeup was flawless.
Her eyes, when they landed on Adaeze, were pure ice. "Ah," she said, sliding into the seat directly across from Ji-Hoon.
The new Mrs. Kong. How unexpected.
The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ji-Hoon's expression didn't change, but Adaeze saw his hands tense almost imperceptibly on the table. His left wrist was visible beneath his cuff, the tattoo catching the light.
"Yuna.
I wasn't aware you were attending. Your uncle invited me."
As a consultant.
Her smile was knife-sharp. "After all, I do have extensive experience with Kong Industries operations. 3 years of experience, in fact." Adaeze felt the implication before she fully understood it.
3 years.
The broken engagement. This was the woman Ji-Hoon had been supposed to marry. "The merger documents are on page 47, Ji-Hoon said flatly, ignoring the subtext entirely. "If you have questions about the terms." "I have many questions." Yuna's eyes never left Adaeze. Starting with the accelerated timeline. "You've known this woman for, what, 8 months?
9?
And suddenly you're married and merging your holdings with her struggling family company. The timeline is not your concern.
It's the board's concern."
"And as your uncle's representative, you represent nothing." Ji-Hoon's voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut steel. "You forfeited any claim to representation 3 years ago when you chose my uncle's interests over mine." The room went very still. Yuna's smile didn't falter, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something ugly. "I made the practical choice, Min-hyuk. Something you never understood. Sentiment has no place in business. Which is exactly why you're sitting on that side of the table instead of beside me." He turned to the rest of the board, dismissing her entirely. "Any other questions about the merger can be addressed to my legal team. This meeting is adjourned."
He stood. Adaeze stood.
The board members stood, looking uncertain. Yuna remained seated, her cold eyes following them to the door.
"Mrs. Kong." Adaeze paused. A word of advice.
Yuna's voice was sweet as poison. "My father used to say, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Your husband's sudden devotion, the convenient rescue of your company, this fairy tale marriage to a stranger. I would examine the terms very carefully if I were you."
She smiled.
"Welcome to the Kong family." In the elevator afterward, Adaeze waited until the doors closed before speaking. "Who is she really?" Ji-Hoon stared at the descending numbers. "My uncle's weapon. She always was, even when I didn't see it." "What happened 3 years ago?"
His jaw tightened. "I was naive.
I believed she cared for me because I wanted to believe it. I ignored every sign that she was feeding information to my uncle, helping him build a case to take the company from me.
His voice was flat. Controlled.
2 weeks before our wedding, I discovered that she had been systematically accessing my private files for months. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every mistake I'd ever made, she compiled all of it and delivered it directly to Dae-young. She was a spy. She was a lesson. He finally met her eyes. Which is why I needed you to hear this now. My uncle will try to use her against us. She knows how I think, how I operate. And she knows that I once loved her, or thought I did. Did you? The elevator doors opened. He stepped out without answering. But as he walked toward the car, Adaeze saw his left hand clench into a fist at his side. The tattoo seemed to pulse beneath his skin.
He did, she realized. He loved her. And she destroyed him for it.
It explained so much. The walls.
The coldness.
The absolute refusal to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. It also explained why he'd structured their arrangement so carefully.
A contract. Clear terms.
No room for sentiment. Because the last time he'd let himself feel something, it had nearly cost him everything. The pressure built over the following weeks. 3 more public appearances.
2 more board meetings.
1 dinner with Soo-yeon that turned into an unexpected interrogation about Adaeze's childhood, her family, her dreams. You're not what I expected, Soo-yeon said near the end of the evening. I thought he'd choose someone cold. Someone as controlled as he is.
Why?
Because he's been alone so long, I assumed he'd forgotten how to want anything else. Soo-yeon swirled her wine glass. But you're warm, aren't you? Under all that careful composure, you actually feel things. Everyone feels things. Not my brother.
Not anymore.
Soo-yeon's eyes grew distant. Not since our father died and he found out what kind of man he really was. Ji-Hoon spent his whole life trying to earn approval from a monster. And when he finally understood the truth.
She shook her head.
Something inside him just stopped. What did he find out? That's not my story to tell. Soo-yeon set down her glass. But I will tell you this, my brother chose you for a reason. Whatever he's told you, whatever you've agreed to, there's more underneath. There's always more with Ji-Hoon. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. Soo-yeon smiled sadly. It's a warning. My brother protects the people he cares about. But he has a very difficult time admitting he cares about anything at all. If you're not careful, you'll spend years waiting for him to say something he's not capable of saying. She stood, gathering her things. I hope you're more patient than I am. Ji-Hoon deserves someone who's willing to wait.
She left.
Adaeze sat alone at the table, thinking about cold eyes and unfinished sentences and a man who had built his entire life around walls he wouldn't admit existed. The break came on the night of the hospital call.
3 a.m.
Her phone shrieking in the darkness. Her mother's doctor on the other end, speaking rapid English about emergency surgery and complications and flying home immediately. She was in the hallway trying to pack, trying not to cry, when Ji-Hoon appeared. He was barefoot again.
White shirt. Dark pants.
That same controlled stillness that usually made her want to scream. What's happening? My mother, she collapsed. They think it's her heart. I need to go, the next flight isn't until. My plane is being prepared. He moved toward her, took the suitcase from her shaking hands. We'll leave within the hour. You don't have to.
Yes.
Something in his voice cracked. Just slightly.
Just enough. I do.
He carried her suitcase to the car. He sat beside her in the back seat.
He didn't touch her.
But when she finally started to cry, silently, shoulders shaking, breaking apart in a way she'd been fighting against for weeks, he handed her a handkerchief.
White. Monogrammed. Expensive.
My grandmother, he said quietly. She was the only person in my family who ever truly loved me. When she died, I was in Tokyo for a business meeting. I didn't make it back in time. Adaeze pressed the handkerchief against her eyes. Is that why we're flying tonight? That's why we're flying tonight. She didn't say thank you.
She didn't have to.
But when the car stopped at the private airfield, she reached out and touched his hand.
Just briefly. Just enough. He didn't pull away. The flight took 14 hours.
Adaeze slept for 3 of them, fitful nightmare-plagued sleep, her head eventually falling against Ji-Hoon's shoulder because there was nowhere else for it to go.
He didn't move her.
When she woke, embarrassed and apologizing, he simply said, "You needed rest."
I didn't. They didn't speak about it again.
Lagos at dawn was exactly as she remembered. Chaotic, loud, gloriously alive. The moment the plane door opened, the heat and humidity wrapped around her like a physical embrace.
Home.
But there was no time to savor it. The hospital was 20 minutes from the airport. Her brother Tebena was waiting in the lobby, dark circles under his eyes, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single night. "She's stable," he said before Adaeze could ask. "The surgery went well. But they want to talk to you about the test results."
He stopped.
His eyes had moved past her.
To Ji-Hoon.
Standing just behind her left shoulder. Wearing clothes that probably cost more than Tebena's entire wardrobe. Looking like he'd been carved from expensive ice.
"Who is this?"
"Tebena, this is
Kang Ji-Hoon."
Ji-Hoon stepped forward, offering his hand. "Your sister's husband."
The lobby fell silent. Tebena's jaw dropped.
And Adaeze realized, belatedly, that she had forgotten to mention one rather significant detail in her phone calls home.
"Husband." Tebena's voice cracked. "Husband?"
"Ada, what the hell is going on?" The explanation took 2 hours. By the end, Tebena was pacing the hospital cafeteria like a caged animal, his coffee growing cold on the table. "Let me get this straight. You married a complete stranger." "Not a complete stranger. A Korean businessman you'd never met."
"Papa knew him."
"Because our father apparently had a secret relationship with this man's family."
"It's complicated."
"And now you're living in Seoul as his wife while our company somehow gets saved by a merger that requires you to stay married for 2 years minimum?" When you say it like that, it sounds insane.
"It is insane, Ada."
"It's completely, absolutely." Tebena stopped. Breathed. Started again. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because I knew you would react exactly like this." "Of course I'm reacting like this."
"You're my sister. You're supposed to." He stopped again. His voice dropped.
"Papa was murdered." The word hung in the air.
Adaeze nodded.
"Emmanuel
Folake. The lawyer.
They've been stealing from us for years. When Papa found out, they replaced his medication. Made it look like a natural heart attack." Tebena sat down heavily. "I knew something was wrong with those three. The way they acted after the funeral, so concerned, so helpful, but underneath, something felt wrong."
He looked up at her. "You're sure?"
"Ji-Hoon has documentation. Bank records. Medical files. Everything we need to put them in prison. And in exchange you just have to stay married to a man you don't love?"
Adaeze hesitated.
She thought about the dance at the gala. The handkerchief in the car. The way he'd said yes, I do when she'd questioned why he was coming with her to Lagos. "The arrangement has its complications," she said carefully. "But Ji-Hoon has been fair."
"Fair."
Tebena laughed bitterly. "You sound like you're negotiating a business deal. Which I suppose you are. It's not that simple."
"Then explain it to me."
"Make me understand why my brilliant, independent sister agreed to sell herself to a stranger."
"I didn't sell myself." Her voice sharpened.
"I made a strategic decision to protect this family. The same way Papa made strategic decisions his whole life. The same way you'll have to make them when you take over the company." "I'm not taking over anything."
"Of course you are. That's the whole point, Tebena."
"I'm buying us time. 2 years for the company to stabilize, for Papa's killers to face justice, for you to finish your degree and learn enough to run things properly."
She met his eyes.
"This was never about me. It was always about making sure our family survives." Her brother was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Ada. But you're also the most stubborn. And I think—"
He hesitated.
"I think maybe you're not being completely honest about why you're doing this."
"What do you mean?"
"I saw the way that man looked at you when he got off the plane. Like you were the only thing in the world worth looking at."
Tebena squeezed her hand.
"And I saw the way you looked at him too. Even when you were scared about Mama. Even when everything was falling apart. You looked at him like you knew he would fix it. He's useful. That doesn't mean—"
"Ada."
Her brother smiled sadly.
"I'm not Papa."
"You don't have to lie to me." He stood, dropping money on the table for the coffee. "Mama's going to wake up soon.
You should be there."
Your husband too, I suppose." He said the word with only a trace of bitterness. "She's going to have a lot of questions."
"Tebena." I'm glad you're home, Ada.
Even if you brought an unexpected Korean billionaire with you.
He kissed her forehead. Go see Mama.
I'll handle things here. He walked away before she could respond. Adaeze sat alone in the cafeteria, her brother's words echoing in her mind.
The way you looked at him.
Like you knew he would fix it. Her mother was awake but weak. The surgery had been successful, but recovery would take time.
Weeks, probably.
Months to return to full strength. Adaeze sat beside the bed, holding her mother's hand, while Ji-Hoon remained standing near the window, present but at a respectful distance. So, her mother said, her voice thin but clear. You married him.
Yes, Mama.
Without telling me first.
I'm sorry.
Everything happened so quickly. Your father always said you were the impulsive one. Her mother's eyes moved to Ji-Hoon.
Come here.
Let me look at you. He moved closer, his expression carefully neutral.
You have cold eyes, her mother said.
But cold eyes sometimes hide warm hearts. Is that true for you, Mr. Kang? I hope you'll judge that for yourself, Mrs. Okonkwo. Diplomatic answer. You're a businessman through and through. Her mother's grip tightened on Adaeze's hand. My daughter is precious to me. More precious than any company, any money, any arrangement.
If you hurt her. Mama.
If you hurt her, her mother continued steadily, I will find you. Sick or not, old or not, I will find you and make you regret every choice that led you to my family. Ji-Hoon met her gaze without flinching. Understood.
Good.
Her mother relaxed back against the pillows.
Now. Tell me about Korea.
Is my daughter eating properly? The food there is too spicy for most people. They stayed in Lagos for 5 days. Ji-Hoon arranged for his personal physician to consult on her mother's case. He arranged for a private nurse to handle recovery care after discharge. He arranged for the hospital bills to be paid without Adaeze ever seeing the total. She found out about that last one when she tried to settle the account herself. It's already been handled, Mrs. Kang, the billing administrator said. Paid in full this morning. She found him in the hospital garden, standing beneath a massive flamboyant tree, its red flowers carpeting the ground around his feet. You paid my mother's medical bills.
Yes.
Without telling me.
Yes.
That wasn't part of the contract.
He turned to face her.
In the Nigerian sunlight, he looked different somehow.
Less controlled. More human.
Not everything needs to be in the contract, Adaeze.
Then why?
Because she's your mother.
Because you were worried. Because I could.
He shrugged slightly, the first casual gesture she'd ever seen from him. Is that a problem? She didn't know how to answer. He was standing close. Closer than he usually allowed. Close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the way the African sun had brought warmth to his usually pale skin. You're a very confusing man, Ji-Hoon. So I've been told. 1 minute you're all business and contracts. The next you're paying hospital bills and flying across the world because I was scared. I'm capable of both.
Why? He was quiet for a moment.
The flamboyant tree rustled above them, scattering more red petals across the ground. When my grandmother was dying, he said finally, she made me promise 3 things. To take care of my sister. To run the company with integrity. And to find someone worth protecting. Someone who would make the power and the money and the endless battles actually mean something. And you think I'm that person? I think you're the first person in a very long time who made me remember that promise. His eyes met hers. I'm not asking you to love me, Adaeze. I'm not even asking you to trust me, not yet. But I am asking you to believe that this arrangement is not just about contracts and business deals. Then what is it about? He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and touched her face. Just briefly. Just his fingertips against her cheekbone.
Give me time, he said.
And I'll show you.
He dropped his hand.
He walked back toward the hospital. And Adaeze stood beneath the flamboyant tree, her cheek burning where he touched it, wondering when exactly this had stopped being a simple business arrangement. They flew back to Seoul 3 days later. Her mother was stable. Tabena had promised to handle the company's day-to-day operations from Lagos. Secretary Yoon had sent 14 urgent messages about board meetings and shareholder concerns and Cha Yuna's increasingly aggressive maneuvering. But on the plane, somewhere over the Indian Ocean, Ji-Hoon did something unexpected.
He fell asleep.
Not deliberately, Adaeze was certain. One moment he was reviewing documents on his tablet, the next his head had tilted back against the seat, his breathing had slowed, and his carefully composed features had softened into something almost vulnerable. She watched him for a long time. The sharp jawline that usually seemed so harsh looked different in sleep. Less like a weapon, more like something that needed protecting. His left hand lay open on the armrest, the tattoo fully visible, those intertwined geometric patterns that she still didn't fully understand. She had so many questions. About his father's crimes. About his grandmother's promises. About whatever secret connected their families beyond the business dealings and the guilt and the contracts. But mostly, she had questions about herself. About why her heart rate increased whenever he entered a room. About why his absence felt heavier than his presence. About why, when he touched her face beneath the flamboyant tree, she hadn't pulled away. This is dangerous, she thought. He's dangerous. This whole situation is dangerous. But danger, she was beginning to realize, was not the same thing as wrong. Seoul at night was beautiful. The car wound through streets she was beginning to recognize, past landmarks she was beginning to name. The city that had seemed so foreign 3 weeks ago was becoming familiar in ways she hadn't expected. Ji-Hoon had woken somewhere over China. He hadn't mentioned his accidental vulnerability, and she hadn't raised it. But something had shifted between them. The careful distance felt smaller now. Less like walls and more like steps. They arrived at the Hanok estate past midnight. Secretary Yoon was waiting, apparently incapable of sleeping like a normal human being, with a folder of documents and a concerned expression. Sir, there's been a development. Your uncle has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's claiming irregularities in the merger documentation. Ji-Hoon's expression hardened immediately. The vulnerable man from the plane vanished, replaced by the cold executive she'd first met in that conference room. What kind of irregularities? He's questioning the validity of Mrs. Kang's company records, suggesting the debt levels may have been misrepresented. Adaeze felt ice slide down her spine. That's a lie. Of course it is. Ji-Hoon's voice was flat. But lies are my uncle's specialty. He's been planning this since the wedding. He took the folder from Yoon. I need the original documentation from Lagos. The forensic audit reports. Everything Emmanuel Achebe tried to hide. Sir, that would require. I know what it requires. He was already moving toward his office. Get it done. The board meeting starts at 9. I want those files in my hands by 7. He disappeared down the hallway. Secretary Yoon bowed slightly to Adaeze. My apologies, ma'am. I know you've only just returned. Don't apologize. She straightened her spine. Just tell me what I can do to help. They worked through the night. Ji-Hoon in his office, coordinating with lawyers across 3 time zones. Adaeze beside him, translating Nigerian financial documents and explaining regulatory details that his Korean team didn't understand. At some point, around 4 a.m., he looked up from his computer and found her curled in the corner of his office couch, a stack of documents on her lap, dark circles under her eyes. You should sleep. So should you. I don't sleep well. I told you. Neither do I. Apparently. She set down the documents. What happens if your uncle succeeds tomorrow? He won't. But if he does? Ji-Hoon leaned back in his chair. The exhaustion was visible now, cracking through his usual control. If he succeeds, he'll use the board vote to invalidate our marriage as a conflict of interest. Your company loses its protection. The merger collapses. The people who killed your father continue operating without consequences. And you. I lose control of Kong Industries. Everything my grandmother built, everything I've spent 10 years protecting, it goes to a man who will strip it for parts and sell whatever's left to the highest bidder. Your uncle would really destroy his own family's legacy? My uncle has always believed the legacy belonged to him. My father was the eldest, but Dae-Young was the ambitious one. He's been waiting 30 years for this opportunity. Ji-Hoon's voice was cold but tired. I won't let him have it. Then we won't let him have it. Adaeze stood, moved to the desk, placed her hands flat on its surface. I didn't agree to this arrangement just to watch it fall apart because some petty man with a grudge decided to throw a tantrum. We have the documentation. We have the truth. We have each other. She hadn't meant to say that last part. But Ji-Hoon's eyes sharpened. Focused on her face with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Do we? What? Have each other. He stood slowly, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. Because this arrangement was supposed to be temporary. Contractual. Safe. It still is. Is it? He was closer now. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the tattoo that seemed to pulse against his wrist. Because I find myself compromised.
By you. By this situation.
By possibilities I told myself I wouldn't consider.
Ji-Hoon.
I made a promise to your father. I made a promise to my grandmother. But standing here right now, I'm not thinking about promises or contracts or business obligations. His hand rose, slowly, deliberately, and touched her face again. The same gesture from Lagos.
But this time, he didn't pull away.
I'm thinking about a woman who hasn't slept in 30 hours because she refuses to let anyone fight her battles for her. A woman who flew across the world to save her family and still found time to translate financial documents for a man she barely knows. A woman who makes me want things I told myself I wasn't allowed to want.
Her heart was pounding now. What things? This. He kissed her. Gentle at first.
Almost a question. Then deeper as she kissed him back, her hands finding his shoulders, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. It was nothing like she expected.
Not cold at all. Warm. Urgent. Real.
When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. That was not in the contract, she whispered.
No.
His forehead rested against hers.
It wasn't.
What happens now?
Now.
He stepped back reluctantly. Now we finish preparing for tomorrow. We face my uncle. We protect everything we've built. And after? His eyes found hers. After, we figure out what this arrangement actually means. Together. He returned to his desk. She returned to the couch. But the air between them had changed completely. And neither of them pretended otherwise. The board meeting started at exactly 9 a.m. The room was full, every director present, every seat occupied. Kang Ji-Hoon sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who had already won. Cha Yuna was positioned at his right hand, her smile sharp as broken glass. Adaeze entered beside Ji-Hoon, her head high, her expression composed. She was wearing one of the traditional Korean hanboks that had appeared in her closet, modified for modern wear, combining Korean silhouettes with African fabric patterns.
It was a statement. I am both. I belong here. Try to make me leave.
Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Ji-Hoon began, his voice oily with false concern. As you know, I've uncovered some troubling irregularities in the merger documentation.
No, Ji-Hoon said.
You've manufactured some troubling irregularities. There's a difference. I beg your pardon. The financial records you've questioned were audited by 3 separate firms. The debt figures were verified by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The merger terms were reviewed by legal teams on 4 continents. Ji-Hoon stood, placing a thick folder on the table. What you've uncovered, uncle, is a desperate attempt to invalidate a legitimate business arrangement because you couldn't find any other way to take control of this company. The room went silent. Ji-Hoon's smile faltered. These are serious accusations.
So are yours.
Which is why I brought documentation.
Ji-Hoon opened the folder.
Bank records showing systematic embezzlement from Okonkwo Industries by 3 individuals who reported directly to my uncle's partners in Lagos. Communication logs proving collaboration between those individuals and members of this board. And medical records showing that Chief Okonkwo's death was not a natural heart attack but a deliberate murder, enabled by people who feared his discovery of their crimes. He looked directly at his uncle. Would you like me to continue? Because I also have records of your investments in the shell companies that were used to launder the stolen funds. Interesting choice, uncle, to profit from the destruction of a man whose daughter you're now trying to discredit. Ji-Hoon's face had gone pale. Yuna's smile had disappeared entirely. The board members were shifting uncomfortably, looking at each other, at the documents, at the heir who had just detonated a bomb in the middle of their carefully controlled world. This is absurd, Ji-Hoon sputtered. You have no proof. I have all the proof. Ji-Hoon's voice was cold.
Precise. Lethal. I've had it for months.
I was simply waiting for you to overplay your hand. Which you did, predictably, the moment you thought you had leverage. He turned to address the full board. The merger with Okonkwo Industries will proceed as planned. My marriage is both legal and legitimate. And anyone who chooses to align with my uncle's faction should be aware that I will not forget, and I will not forgive. His eyes swept the room. This meeting is adjourned. He offered his hand to Adaeze.
She took it.
They walked out together. Behind them, Ji-Hoon was shouting something, but the words were lost in the buzz of conversation as the board members erupted into chaos. In the elevator, Adaeze finally exhaled.
That was necessary.
I was going to say terrifying. You completely destroyed him.
Not completely. Not yet.
Ji-Hoon's expression was grim. He's wounded, but he's not finished. Men like my uncle don't surrender easily. He'll retreat, regroup, try another approach. So what do we do? The elevator doors opened. Ji-Hoon led her into the hallway, then stopped.
Turned to face her.
We stay married. We continue presenting a united front. We give him no weaknesses to exploit. Is that all?
No.
His eyes softened, just slightly, just enough. We also acknowledge that somewhere in the middle of all this, something changed.
For both of us. Did it?
You kissed me back last night, Adaeze. That wasn't in the contract either. She felt her face warm. I was tired.
It was 4 a.m.
Judgment was impaired. Is your judgment impaired now? Now it's 9:30 in the morning and I've had approximately 2 hours of sleep. That's not an answer.
No. She met his eyes. It isn't.
They stood in the hallway of the 60-story tower, surrounded by steel and glass and the lingering tension of a battle half won.
I need time, she said finally.
To understand what this is.
What we're becoming.
This arrangement started as business, Ji-Hoon. I can't just flip a switch and pretend it's something else. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. Then what are you asking?
He reached out. Touched her face again.
That gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. I'm asking you to stay.
Not because of the contract.
Not because of our families. Stay because you want to be here. Stay because you want to find out what happens next.
His hand dropped. Think about it.
There's no deadline this time.
He walked away.
And Adaeze stood in the hallway, her heart hammering, her mind racing. When her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number.
She looked at the screen.
The message was short.
And signed.
And it changed everything. Your father's letter was incomplete. The missing page names the person who ordered his death. It wasn't Emmanuel or Folake or the lawyer. Ask your husband what his mother did in Lagos in 1994. Ask him why she really moved to Switzerland. Ask him what secret he's protecting that even he doesn't fully understand. The phone felt like ice in her hands. His mother.
Lagos. 1994.
Adaeze looked down the hallway where Ji-Hoon had disappeared.
He was hiding something.
Something bigger than business deals and old debts and promises to dead men. And she was going to find out what it was. Adaeze stood frozen in that hallway for exactly 90 seconds. 90 seconds of staring at the message. Reading it again.
Again.
Trying to find some way to interpret it that didn't shatter everything she'd begun to believe about the man she'd married. Ask your husband what his mother did in Lagos in 1994. The year her father started his company. The year the Kang Industries partnership was supposed to change everything. The year her family nearly lost it all before they'd even begun. Ji-Hoon's father had been responsible for that betrayal.
But his mother?
She'd never heard anything about the mother being involved. Every story, every record, every piece of evidence pointed to Kang Sr. as the architect of her father's destruction. The mother was a ghost in the family history, fled to Switzerland, never photographed in Korea, never mentioned in company documents. Why? She typed a response to the unknown number. Who are you? The message bounced back immediately. Number disconnected. She didn't go back to the estate. Instead, she took the elevator to the ground floor, walked out of Kang Industries Tower, and hailed a taxi to the one place in Seoul she knew she could think clearly. The Korean National Library. It was massive, a modernist building, all sharp angles and soaring spaces, and it was anonymous. No one from Ji-Hoon's world would think to look for her here. She found a computer terminal in a quiet corner and began to search. Kang Industries 1994 Lagos Kang Ji-Hoon Mother Switzerland Korean Business Nigeria 1990s Kang Family Scandal. Most results were useless. Corporate profiles, merger announcements, the same sanitized history she'd already read a dozen times. But buried on page 17 of the search results, she found something different. A scanned article from a defunct Nigerian newspaper. The Lagos Observer, dated November 1994. The headline made her blood run cold. Korean businesswoman hospitalized after Lagos incident, Kang Industries director injured in confrontation with Nigerian partner. The article was fragmented, pieces missing where the scan had failed.
But enough remained.
Mrs. Kang Hygiene 34, was admitted to Lagos University Teaching Hospital following an incident at the construction site of the proposed Kang Okonkwo manufacturing facility. Sources indicate a dispute over contract terms escalated into physical confrontation. Mr. Okonkwo has declined to comment, stating only that the partnership negotiations have been indefinitely suspended. Mrs. Kang sustained injuries to her head and left arm and was flown to London for emergency treatment. Adaeze's hands were shaking. Her father had been involved in an incident that hospitalized Ji-Hoon's mother.
A physical confrontation.
She'd been injured. And then the partnership collapsed. The Kangs withdrew. Her father lost everything he'd invested. But that wasn't the story Ji-Hoon had told her. In his version, his father had sabotaged the deal purely out of cruelty, a show of power against a man who dared to negotiate as an equal. There had been no mention of his mother.
No mention of an incident.
No mention of injuries. What really happened in Lagos? She searched for 3 more hours.
More fragments emerged.
A follow-up article noting that Mrs. Kang had been discharged from a London hospital and returned to family. A brief mention in a Korean business journal that she had stepped back from corporate duties for health reasons. A society page noting her relocation to Geneva in 1997.
And then nothing.
It was like Kang hygiene had ceased to exist. But people didn't just disappear.
They were hidden. Erased.
Protected from something, or protecting someone else from something. Ask him what secret he's protecting that even he doesn't fully understand.
Maybe Ji-Hoon didn't know.
Maybe whatever happened in Lagos had been buried so deeply that even the son hadn't been told the truth. Or maybe he knew everything. Maybe this entire arrangement, the rescue, the marriage, the promises, was built on a foundation of lies she hadn't even imagined. There was only one way to find out. She returned to the estate at sunset. The hammock looked different now, its beauty suddenly sinister, its warmth suddenly suspect. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every carefully designed corner seemed to mask a secret. Ji-Hoon was waiting in the main hall.
He looked exhausted. Worried.
His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, the tattoo on his wrist fully visible. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Relief, then concern, then that careful blankness she was beginning to hate. You disappeared. His voice was controlled, but she heard the tension beneath it. Secretary Yoon said you left the building hours ago. You didn't answer your phone. I was doing research.
Research?
On your mother. The words landed like bombs. Ji-Hoon's entire body went still. That preternatural stillness that she'd once found impressive and now found terrifying. What about my mother?
Lagos.
1994. The incident that hospitalized her. Adaeze pulled out her phone, showing him the scanned article. You told me your father sabotaged my father's company out of cruelty. You didn't mention that your mother was injured in a confrontation with him first.
He didn't look at the phone. He didn't need to.
Where did you get this? Someone sent me a message.
Anonymous.
Said I should ask you what your mother did in Lagos. What secret you're protecting.
She stepped closer.
So I'm asking. What really happened?
Adaeze. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't deflect.
Don't manage me. For once in your life, just tell me the truth. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the last light of sunset was fading, turning the garden gold and amber. Inside, the air felt heavy with decades of buried secrets.
I don't know the whole truth, Ji-Hoon said finally.
That's not a deflection, it's a fact. What I know is fragments. Pieces that never quite fit together. Then tell me the pieces. He moved to the window, his back to her. The same posture she'd seen in the conference room the first day they met. A man facing something he couldn't outrun. My mother went to Lagos in September of 1994. The partnership with your father was my father's project, but she was handling the operational negotiations. She was good at that, better than him actually. She had a talent for building relationships, for making people trust her. What happened when she got there? I don't know exactly. I was 8 years old. What I remember is pieces, my mother calling from Lagos, sounding excited. Then a different call days later, where she sounded scared. Then my father leaving suddenly, coming back without her, refusing to explain why.
He turned to face her.
She was in the hospital for 3 weeks.
London, not Lagos. When she finally came home, she was different. Quieter.
She flinched when my father came near her.
She stopped coming to company events.
And she never, ever spoke about Nigeria again. The article said there was a confrontation. With my father. I know what the article said.
Ji-Hoon's voice was tight.
But articles can be planted. Narratives can be controlled. My father was very good at controlling narratives. Are you saying the article was a lie? I'm saying I don't know what's true. He ran a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture she'd ever seen from him. My father told me your father attacked her. That's why he destroyed the partnership, why he made sure Chief Okonkwo lost everything. Revenge for what was done to his wife. And you believed him?
I was a child. Of course I believed him.
But as I got older, things stopped making sense. My mother's fear of my father. Her sudden move to Switzerland. The way she refused to see any of us for years afterward.
He met Adaeze's eyes.
When my father died, I found records. Evidence that he had lied about many things. But about Lagos, about what really happened, there was nothing. Just gaps where documentation should have been. Like someone had deliberately erased the truth. Or like someone was protecting it.
Protecting what? I don't know.
Adaeze's voice was raw. But someone sent me that message for a reason. Someone who knows what really happened and wants me to find out.
Who would? His phone rang.
Secretary Yoon's number. Ji-Hoon answered, listening in silence for 30 seconds. His expression changed, hardened, became something cold and dangerous.
I understand. Keep her there. He hung up.
What is it?
Cha Yuna. His voice was ice.
She just tried to access my mother's private medical files. The ones I had sealed after my father died.
Why would she?
Because my uncle sent her. Because they know something about Lagos that I don't. And they think whatever it is will destroy this marriage.
He moved toward the door.
I need to get to the office.
Now.
I'm coming with you.
Adaeze.
This involves my father too. Whatever happened in Lagos, whatever your mother did or didn't do, it destroyed my family's future. I have a right to know. He hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then let's go. They reached Kong Industries Tower in 20 minutes. Secretary Yoon was waiting in the executive suite, his usually composed face showing signs of genuine distress. Beside him, 2 security officers flanked a door that led to the company's secure records room. She was in there for approximately 15 minutes before the system flagged the unauthorized access, Yoon reported. She had Director Kang's old authorization codes. They should have been deactivated years ago.
My uncle.
Ji-Hoon's voice was flat. He kept them active.
A backup plan.
Where is she now? Conference room B. She's demanding to speak with you.
Of course she is. He turned to Adaeze.
The records room is that door. My mother's files should be in section K. I need to deal with Yuna, can you?
Go.
I'll handle this.
He paused.
Something flickered in his eyes. Gratitude maybe or something deeper.
Be careful.
Whatever's in there, we might not be ready for it. I'm not ready for any of this.
But we don't have a choice.
He nodded once, then strode toward the conference room. Adaeze turned to the security officers.
Let me in.
The records room was a vault. Rows of secure filing cabinets stretched into the darkness, each one requiring biometric access. The walls were lined with fireproof materials. The air was climate-controlled, precisely maintained to preserve decades of company history. Section K was in the back corner. Her hands trembled as she pressed her thumb to the scanner. She'd been added to the system the day after the wedding, full spousal access to all non-classified files.
The cabinet clicked open.
Inside were dozens of folders. Medical records.
Travel documents. Personal correspondence.
All organized with the obsessive precision she was beginning to associate with Ji-Hoon's approach to everything. But the folder she needed was obvious. It was labeled simply, Lagos, 1994 sealed.
She opened it.
The first page was a hospital intake form. Lagos University Teaching Hospital. September 17, 1994. Patient, Kang Ji-Hoon, 34, Korean national. Presenting complaint, multiple contusions to head and shoulders. Lacerations on left arm. Signs of psychological distress. Cause, domestic violence incident.
Perpetrator, spouse.
Adaeze read it again. Domestic violence incident.
Perpetrator, spouse.
Ji-Hoon's father had beaten his mother.
In Lagos.
And then blamed Chief Okonkwo to cover it up. The next pages confirmed it. Photographs of injuries, professional medical documentation, clearly taken as evidence. A statement from a Nigerian nurse who had witnessed Kang Ji-Hoon's admission, describing her claims that her husband had attacked her during an argument about the partnership terms.
And then a letter. Handwritten.
In Korean, with an English translation attached. Dated October 1994. To whoever finds this record.
My name is Kang Ji-Hoon.
I am writing this because I don't know if I will survive what my husband is planning. He has told everyone that Adaeze Okonkwo attacked me.
This is a lie.
My husband beat me because I refused to sabotage the partnership. I believed in the project. I believed Emmanuel was a good man, an honest man, someone who could help our company expand ethically. My husband wanted control, not partnership. When I refused to manipulate the negotiations in his favor, he punished me. And then he used my injuries to justify destroying the man I had tried to protect. I am being sent to London, then Switzerland. I don't know if I will ever return to Korea. I don't know if my children will ever know the truth. But I'm leaving this record because someone must know what really happened. Adaeze Okonkwo is innocent. My husband is a monster. And if anything happens to Emmanuel or his family, it is because of Kang Sr.'s vengeance, not because of anything Emmanuel did.
Please.
If you find this,
make it right. Kang Ji-Hoon.
Adaeze couldn't breathe. Her father had been innocent. He'd been destroyed not because he'd hurt anyone, but because he'd refused to be controlled. Because Ji-Hoon's mother had tried to protect him. Because a powerful man had needed someone to blame for his own violence. And 30 years later, that same cycle had repeated.
The same corruption. The same cruelty.
The same innocent people destroyed by those with power. Except this time, the son was trying to break the cycle. This time, the son had married the daughter. And neither of them had known the full truth until now. She found Ji-Hoon in conference room B. Yuna was gone, escorted out by security, according to Yoon. But Ji-Hoon was still standing at the window, his back to the door, his reflection visible in the glass.
He looked destroyed. You found it. Not a question.
Your mother's letter.
He turned slowly.
His eyes were red-rimmed. The careful control was cracking, showing something raw and wounded underneath.
I didn't know, he said. About the letter. About what she wrote.
I knew my father was capable of violence. I'd seen hints of it, glimpses he couldn't quite hide. But I never knew.
He stopped. Swallowed.
I never knew he beat her. I never knew he blamed your father to cover it up. I spent years believing your father was a criminal. I spent years thinking I was atoning for his sins when really you were cleaning up your father's crimes against my family.
Yes.
The word hung in the air between them. Adaeze felt her heart breaking in ways she hadn't expected. She should be angry. She was angry, at Kang Sr., at the decades of lies, at the destruction that had shaped both their families for a generation. But looking at Ji-Hoon now, she couldn't find the energy for rage. He'd been a victim too. 8 years old, watching his mother disappear, believing a lie that his father had carefully constructed. Growing up in the shadow of a monster, without ever knowing the full extent of the monstrosity. And then, as an adult, trying to make it right. Not knowing that his atonement was based on a false premise. Not knowing that the guilt he carried was for the wrong sin. Your uncle knows, she said quietly. That's why he sent Yuna for the files. If this gets out, the company's reputation is destroyed. My family name becomes synonymous with domestic violence and corporate corruption. Every deal I've made in the past 10 years gets questioned, every partnership gets re-examined. And our marriage?
He looked at her.
Really looked at her, with none of his usual armor in place. Our marriage was built on a promise I made to your father. A promise to make right what was done to him. But now I know the truth, the full truth, and the promise isn't enough anymore.
What do you mean?
I mean that atoning for my father's sins is not the same as loving you.
And I find. He stepped closer.
I find that I want to do both. That I have been doing both, even when I told myself it was just business.
Ji-Hoon.
I'm not asking you to forgive my family. What was done to your father, to your whole family, it's unforgivable. But I'm asking you to let me try anyway.
Not as a contractor. Not as a business partner.
As a man who has spent the past month falling in love with a woman he never expected to need. The words settled over her like something warm and heavy. Falling in love.
You don't know how to love, she said. Soo-Yun told me.
She said something inside you stopped.
Something did stop. After Yuna.
After I learned how easily trust could be weaponized. He reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. But you started something else. Something I thought I'd never feel again.
She didn't pull away. This is insane, she whispered.
My father was destroyed by your father. Your mother tried to protect him and was beaten for it. Our entire relationship is built on trauma and lies and despite all of that, you're still here. His fingers interlaced with hers. You could have walked away a dozen times. When you learned about the contract. When you learned about the debt. When you found your father's letter. But you stayed. I stayed because my family needed me to.
Did you?
She thought about the past month.
The sleepless nights in his garden. The flight to Lagos. The dance at the gala.
The kiss at 4 a.m. when everything seemed impossible.
No, she admitted. Not just for them.
His free hand rose to her face.
That gesture again.
The one that was becoming as familiar as breathing.
Then stay for us.
For whatever this is becoming. We can expose the truth about my father without destroying each other. We can rebuild both our families' legacies together.
How?
I don't know yet. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But I've never failed to find a solution when the stakes mattered.
And you, his thumb traced her cheekbone. You matter.
She should have been more cautious. She should have demanded time, space, distance from the overwhelming revelations of the past few hours.
But she was tired of caution.
Tired of contracts and arrangements and careful calculations.
She kissed him.
This time, there was no hesitation on either side. His arms wrapped around her immediately, pulling her close, and she let herself sink into the warmth of him, the contradictions of cold exterior and burning intensity underneath. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, his forehead rested against hers.
We still have a war to fight, she murmured. I know.
Your uncle won't stop just because we found the truth. I know that too. So what now? His eyes met hers.
Determined. Alive. Now we fight.
Together. The call to Switzerland went through at 3 a.m. Seoul time. Ji-Hoon had debated making it for hours, pacing his office, then the garden, then his office again while Adaeze watched from the couch. She understood his hesitation. This conversation would rewrite everything he'd believed about his family.
But it had to happen. Mother.
His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. We need to talk about Lagos. Adaeze couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she could see its effect on Ji-Hoon.
His jaw tightening.
His eyes closing. The tattoo on his wrist seeming to pulse as his fist clenched and released. After 10 minutes, he put the phone on speaker. Didn't want you to carry that burden, Ji-Hoon. Kang Ji-Hoon's voice was soft, accented, fragile in a way that spoke of decades of hiding.
You were so young.
And your father was so convincing. Even I started to doubt my own memories sometimes. You let me believe a lie my entire life. I let you believe what kept you safe. Your father was dangerous. If he'd known I'd left documentation, if he'd suspected you might find out.
Her voice cracked.
He would have destroyed you too. The way he destroyed everyone who challenged him.
He's dead now.
He's been dead for 8 years. And his brother is still very much alive. Something harder entered her voice.
Dae-young knew Ji-Hoon. Not everything, but enough.
He helped cover up what your father did to me. He helped plant the story about Adaeze Okonkwo. He profited from the destruction of that partnership and a dozen others afterward.
Adaeze leaned forward.
Mrs. Kang, this is Adaeze Okonkwo. Emmanuel's daughter. A sharp intake of breath from the phone. Emmanuel's daughter. The older woman's voice was barely above a whisper. He used to show me photographs. Said you were the light of his life. Even then, so young, you had eyes that could see right through people. Did you know my father well? We worked together for 3 months. He was the kindest man I'd ever met in business.
Honest to a fault.
He actually believed that hard work and integrity could compete with power and corruption.
A sad laugh.
I tried to protect him from my husband.
I failed.
You left a record. That's not failure, that's courage. A record that sat in a filing cabinet for 30 years while your family suffered. Ji-Hoon's voice was heavy with guilt.
I should have done more.
I should have found a way to make the truth public, even if it cost me everything. Why didn't you? Silence for a long moment.
Because I was afraid.
Because I had children who needed a mother. Because every time I thought about going public, I remembered what my husband was capable of, and what Dae-young was capable of, and I convinced myself that silence was safer.
And now? Now I'm old. My children are grown. My husband is dead.
Something shifted in her voice, determination replacing fear. And his daughter is married to Emmanuel's daughter. Which means maybe, finally, the cycle can be broken. Ji-Hoon spoke for the first time in minutes. What do you know about Uncle Dae-young's involvement?
Everything.
I kept my own records, Ji-Hoon. Separate from the company files. Hidden in Switzerland, where no one could access them without my permission. What kind of records? Financial transactions.
Communication logs.
Evidence that Dae-young collaborated with your father on at least 12 instances of corporate sabotage, fraud, and intimidation over 20 years.
A pause.
Including documentation that he personally authorized the embezzlement scheme that targeted Okonkwo Industries after your father's death. He's been finishing his brother's work. Adeze's blood ran cold. Dae-young wasn't just trying to take over the company. He was the one who had orchestrated her father's murder. Dawn was breaking over Seoul by the time they had a strategy. Hygiene would send her records by secure courier, documents that would arrive within 48 hours. Combined with the files Adaeze had found in Section K and Ji-Hoon's existing evidence against Emmanuel, Folake, and the lawyer, they would have enough to bring down not just the conspirators in Lagos, but Kang Dae-young himself. But timing was everything.
He'll see it coming, Ji-Hoon said, pacing his office.
The moment he realizes those files were accessed, he'll start preparing countermeasures.
Destroying evidence.
Briefing lawyers. Possibly even fleeing the country.
So we move first, Adaeze said.
Before he has time to react.
We need the board.
A majority vote to launch a formal investigation. But half of them are loyal to him. Then we give them a reason to change their loyalty.
He stopped pacing. What do you mean?
Your uncle's power comes from the belief that he's protecting the company. That he's the responsible alternative to you, the hothead who married a foreigner on a whim. She stood, moving to the window. But what if the board found out that he's the real threat? That his vendetta against my family has exposed Kong Industries to massive legal liability. The evidence would have to be irrefutable. Your mother's records will be.
But we also need a witness.
Someone inside his operation who can confirm the conspiracy from first-hand experience.
Ji-Hoon's expression shifted. Understanding dawning.
Emmanuel Achebe. He's been embezzling from my company for years. Under Dae-young's direction. If we can get him to testify, immunity in exchange for information. He's the one who replaced your father's medication. He's a murderer.
I know. The words hurt coming out.
But if we can't get him to flip, we lose the direct connection between Dae-young and my father's death. The paper trail alone might not be enough. You're asking me to offer immunity to the man who killed your father. I'm asking you to help me make a choice I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking.
Justice isn't always clean, Ji-Hoon.
Sometimes it's ugly and compromised and nothing like what we imagined. But it's still justice.
He crossed the room to her.
Took her hands in his. If we do this, if we offer Achebe immunity, you'll never get to see him punished for what he did.
I know.
Can you live with that?
She thought about her father. His letter.
His hope that Ji-Hoon would protect her. My father didn't ask you to get revenge. He asked you to make things right.
She met his eyes.
Maybe making things right means accepting that some debts can't be paid.
Some wounds can't be healed.
Some justice is better than none. He was quiet for a long moment.
Then he nodded.
I'll have my legal team draft the immunity agreement. We approach Achebe tonight. Emmanuel Achebe was hiding in a rental apartment in Victoria Island. He'd fled Lagos 2 days after the board meeting where Ji-Hoon had exposed the embezzlement scheme, tipped off, presumably, by someone in Dae-young's network.
But he hadn't run far.
And he hadn't been careful enough to avoid Ji-Hoon's security team. They found him at 10 p.m. local time. Adaeze watched the video feed from Seoul as Ji-Hoon's people entered the apartment. Achebe was sitting at a cheap table, staring at his phone, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. When he saw the security team, he didn't run.
He didn't fight.
He just looked at the camera, somehow knowing she was watching, and said, "I wondered when you'd find me." The negotiation took 4 hours. Ji-Hoon led it via video conference, with Adaeze sitting silently beside him. Han Min-ji, the attorney who had witnessed their wedding, handled the legal details.
Achebe started defiant. Denied everything.
Claimed he was being framed by enemies within the company. But when Ji-Hoon played the recording of Hygiene's statement, describing in detail how Dae-young had organized the embezzlement scheme and ordered the removal of obstacles, something in Achebe's face cracked. "He promised we'd be protected," Achebe said finally. "He said the Kang family always protects their partners. That if anything went wrong, his lawyers would handle it." "His lawyers are not here," Ji-Hoon said. "His lawyers are in Seoul, preparing to make you the scapegoat for everything. Dae-young has already started distancing himself from your operation. There are emails, backdated, but the board won't look closely, claiming he had no knowledge of the embezzlement. That you acted alone." Achebe's face went gray. "That's not, he ordered it, he specifically." "I know. We know. But without your testimony, we can't prove it. And without proof, you go to prison for the rest of your life while he walks free." Silence. Achebe's eyes moved to Adaeze. "You're his daughter. You know what I did. Why would you offer me anything?" She forced herself to speak. Forced her voice to stay level. "Because I want the man who gave the orders more than I want the man who followed them. Because my father would have wanted justice for our family, not just revenge against one person. Because," her voice cracked slightly, "because I'm tired. I'm tired of watching powerful people destroy everyone around them and face no consequences. And if letting you walk is the price for finally ending this, then I'll pay it." Achebe stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at the table. "I'll testify. Against Dae-young. Against whoever you need me to. Just." His voice broke. "Your father. He was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him. I want you to know that I knew that. Even when I was doing it. I knew. That doesn't make it better." "No. It doesn't." He looked up, eyes red. "But maybe it makes this, what I'm doing now, mean something. Even a little." Adaeze didn't respond. Ji-Hoon took over, working through the details of the agreement. And when the call finally ended, Adaeze walked out onto the balcony of Ji-Hoon's office and cried until there was nothing left. 3 days later, Kang Industries held an emergency board meeting. Every director was present. Secretary Yoon had made personal calls to ensure attendance, hinting at revelations that would reshape the company's future. The conference room was charged with tension, everyone aware that something significant was about to happen. Kang Dae-young arrived last, as always. He took his seat at the head of the table with the confidence of a man who had never truly been challenged. Yuna was not with him. She'd resigned 2 days earlier, fleeing to Hong Kong before Ji-Hoon's legal team could file charges related to the unauthorized file access. "Let's make this quick," Dae-young said. "I have meetings this afternoon. You'll want to clear your schedule." Ji-Hoon stood at the opposite end of the table, Adaeze beside him. "This may take a while." He pressed a button on the conference room's control panel. The screen behind him lit up with the first slide of a presentation entitled, Kang Dae-young, A Legacy of Corruption. The next 2 hours were systematic destruction. Ji-Hoon presented everything. The documentation of his father's violence against his mother. The records of the Lagos cover-up. The financial evidence connecting Dae-young to 12 instances of corporate sabotage. The video testimony from Emmanuel Achebe describing in detail how Dae-young had ordered the embezzlement scheme, and how he had instructed the handling of Emmanuel Okonkwo when the old man got too close to the truth. The board sat in stunned silence. Dae-young tried to interrupt several times, denials, accusations, demands that Ji-Hoon stop this farce, but the evidence was overwhelming. With each new slide, each new document, his support crumbled. By the time Ji-Hoon reached the final section, a letter from Kang Hyejin herself, read aloud, detailing 30 years of fear and guilt and hope that someday her son would find the courage to expose the truth, 3 board members were openly weeping. "I move for an immediate vote," one of the senior directors said. "To remove Kang Dae-young from all positions within Kang Industries and to launch a formal investigation into criminal charges." "Seconded," said another. The vote was unanimous. Dae-young didn't go quietly. Security had to escort him from the building. He screamed threats the entire way, promising lawsuits, promising destruction, promising that Ji-Hoon would regret this for the rest of his life. But the doors closed behind him. And for the first time in 30 years, Kang Industries was free of the corruption that had poisoned it from within. The fallout was immediate and massive. News of Dae-young's removal broke within hours. Someone on the board had leaked to the press, and by evening, every major financial publication in Asia was running the story. Kang Industries' heir exposes decades of corruption. Family secrets tear apart Korean conglomerate. Murder, fraud and betrayal, the dark history of the Kang dynasty. Ji-Hoon gave exactly one interview, a carefully controlled conversation with a respected Korean journalist, with Adaeze beside him. My father was not a good man, he said, the words measured and deliberate. He built an empire on the destruction of others, and he raised me to believe that power was the only thing that mattered. I spent years trying to live up to his expectations. I nearly destroyed myself in the process.
What changed?
His eyes moved to Adaeze. I learned that there are things worth more than power.
Things worth protecting.
And things worth sacrificing everything for.
Your wife. My wife. Her family.
The memory of her father, who was destroyed by mine for no reason except that he dared to be good in a world that punished goodness. Ji-Hoon's voice was steady, but his hand found Adaeze under the table. I can't undo what was done. But I can make sure it never happens again. The interview aired that night. By morning, public opinion had shifted. Ji-Hoon Kang was no longer seen as the cold, calculating heir of a corrupt dynasty. He was seen as something else entirely. A man who had chosen truth over legacy.
Love over power.
Justice over silence. They flew to Lagos a week later. Her mother had been discharged from the hospital, and the family was gathering at the estate where Adaeze had grown up, the house her father had built with his own hands, brick by brick, dream by dream.
Tebena met them at the door.
His expression had softened since their last meeting. The anger was still there, but underneath it now was something else.
Respect, maybe.
Or at least the beginning of understanding. You actually did it, he said, shaking Ji-Hoon's hand. You took down the man who killed our father.
We both did. No. Tebena's grip tightened.
She made the hard choices. You just had the resources to execute them. He released Ji-Hoon's hand and pulled Adaeze into a fierce hug. I'm sorry I doubted you.
Papa would be proud.
She hugged him back, tears streaming down her face.
He would be proud of you too, Tebena.
You kept everything running while I was gone. The company, Mama's care, all of it. Speaking of Mama. Tebena stepped back, nodding toward the living room.
She's waiting.
She has things she wants to say. Her mother was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, the same chair her father used to occupy in the evenings, reading newspapers and drinking tea. She looked stronger than the last time Adaeze had seen her. Still fragile, but present in a way she hadn't been during the hospital stay. My daughter, she said, reaching out her hands. My brave, foolish, wonderful daughter. Adaeze knelt beside the chair, taking her mother's hands.
It's over, Mama. Dae-young is finished.
The people who hurt Papa will face justice. The company is safe.
I know.
I've been watching the news. Her mother's eyes moved to Ji-Hoon, standing in the doorway.
Come here, young man.
Don't hover like a stranger. He moved closer, awkward in a way Adaeze rarely saw from him. Her mother studied him for a long moment. Your mother called me, she said finally.
2 days ago.
She told me everything, about Lagos, about your father, about the choices she made and the ones she regrets. Ji-Hoon's expression flickered with surprise. She wanted me to know that she's sorry, her mother continued. That she's been sorry for 30 years. That not a day goes by when she doesn't think about my Emmanuel and wish she could have protected him better. I didn't know she. She also told me something else.
Her mother's voice softened.
She told me that when she watches you with my daughter, through the news coverage, through the photographs, she sees something she never saw in your father.
Tenderness. Care.
The willingness to sacrifice power for love. She reached out and took Ji-Hoon's hand, pulling him down to kneel beside Adaeze. Emmanuel was the love of my life. When I lost him, I thought I would never forgive the people responsible. But watching you two these past weeks. Watching you fight together, suffer together, choose each other over everything that tried to tear you apart. She smiled, the first real smile Adaeze had seen from her since the funeral. I think my husband would be pleased. I think he would look at you, Ji-Hoon, and see the man he always hoped his daughter would find. Not because of your money or your power, but because of your heart.
Ji-Hoon bowed his head.
When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Thank you, Mrs. Okonkwo. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve those words. That night, Adaeze couldn't sleep. She wandered through the estate's gardens, smaller than Ji-Hoon's hammock, but filled with memories that made every corner precious. The mango tree she'd climbed as a child. The bench where her father used to read to her. The flower bed her mother had tended through every season. Ji-Hoon found her there, sitting on the bench in the moonlight. Your brother said I'd find you here. Tebena's been watching me like a hawk since we arrived. I think he's still not sure about you. I wouldn't be sure about me either. He sat beside her on the bench, close but not touching. Your family is protective. I respect that. My family is suspicious. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to look at him. In the moonlight, with his suit exchanged for a simple shirt and his careful control relaxed, he looked younger. More human. More like the man she was beginning to know beneath all the armor. The contract says 2 years, she said quietly. But everything's changed now. Dae-young is gone. The merger is secure. My family is safe. Yes. So the question becomes, what happens next? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved to the garden around them, the modest beauty of her childhood home. I've been thinking about that. About what I actually want, not what the contract stipulates. His voice was careful, each word considered. I've spent my entire life in Seoul. Building an empire. Protecting a legacy. I never thought about what I might want for myself, because wanting things felt like weakness. And now I know what I want. He turned to face her fully. I want you, Adaeze. Not as a contractual wife. Not as a business partner. As a real partner, in everything. What does that mean? It means I want to tear up the original contract. It means I want to get married again, properly with your family in mind, with vows that actually mean something instead of legal obligations. Her heart was pounding. You want to propose. Here. In my family's garden. I want to ask you to choose me. The same way I'm choosing you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me the last time I saw her before she died. She told me to give it to someone who made me believe that love was worth the risk. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, set with a single stone that caught the moonlight and seemed to glow from within. I know this has been fast. I know we've been through things that most couples don't experience in a lifetime. But I also know that when I think about my future, about what I want it to look like, who I want beside me, the only face I see is yours. He took the ring from the box. Adaeze Okonkwo. Will you marry me? Not for contracts or companies or family obligations. Just for us. Because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth loving back. She stared at the ring. At his face. At the vulnerability he was showing her. The walls completely down, the armor completely gone. Everything logical told her to wait. To think. To be careful. But she was tired of careful. Yes. The word came out like a breath. Simple. True. His face transformed, relief and joy and something deeper all flooding through at once. He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. Then he kissed her. Under the mango tree where she'd played as a child. In the garden her father had built with his own hands. Surrounded by everything she'd loved before she knew what love could become. When they broke apart, she was crying again. That's the second time you've made me cry today, she said. I hope they're good tears. The best kind. He pulled her close, and they sat together on the bench, not speaking, not needing to, as the Lagos moon rose higher and the night wrapped around them like a promise. The second wedding was nothing like the first. No courthouse. No lawyers. No cold efficiency or contractual obligations. Instead, there was the beach at Tarkwa Bay, where Adaeze's parents had been married 40 years earlier, decorated with orchids flown in from Korea and African lilies grown in her mother's garden. There were 200 guests, a mix of Korean executives and Nigerian family and everyone in between. There was music, traditional Igbo drums blending with Korean strings in something that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. And there was love. Adaeze wore a gown that combined elements of both cultures, a fitted bodice inspired by Korean hanbok, flowing into a skirt of traditional Nigerian osawok, hand-woven in her family's colors. Ji-Hoon wore a suit that managed to look both impossibly elegant and slightly uncomfortable. He'd never been good at being the center of attention. But when she walked toward him down the aisle her father's friends had built, when their eyes met across the distance, he smiled. Actually smiled. And Adaeze knew with complete certainty that every moment of pain and confusion and fear had been worth it for this. The vows were simple. I promise to protect you, he said, his voice carrying across the beach. Not because a contract requires it, but because you have become my heart walking outside my body. I promise to be patient when I want to be controlling, and honest when I want to hide. I promise to love you through every challenge, every conflict, every impossible situation, because loving you is the first thing I've ever done that made me feel truly alive. She reached up and touched the tattoo on his wrist, visible beneath his rolled cuff as always. I promise to trust you, she said. Even when it's terrifying. Even when every instinct tells me to protect myself. I promise to be your partner in everything, in business, in family, in whatever chaos the future throws at us. I promise to love you not in spite of your walls, but because of what's behind them. And I promise that no matter what happens, you will never have to face it alone again. The officiant, a Korean priest who had flown in from Seoul, working alongside a Nigerian pastor who had known her father for 30 years, smiled. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. For real this time. The beach erupted in applause and laughter. Ji-Hoon pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Not carefully, not controlled, but with all the passion he'd spent years hiding from the world. When they broke apart, breathless and grinning, Soo-yeon was cheering louder than anyone else.
Finally, she shouted.
My brother finally figured out how to be human. The reception lasted until dawn. There was dancing, energetic, joyful, mixing Nigerian and Korean styles in ways that delighted everyone and confused the photographers. There was food, jollof rice and bulgogi, suya and kimchi, a wedding cake decorated with both the Kang family crest and the Okonkwo family symbols. And there were speeches. Tabena's was short and pointed. I still don't completely trust you, brother-in-law. But you make my sister happy, and that's enough.
For now.
Her mother's was tearful and beautiful. Emmanuel is watching, Ada.
I know he is.
And he's so proud of the woman you've become. Soo-yeon's was surprisingly serious. My brother has been alone for so long. He convinced himself that love was a weakness, that caring about anyone made you vulnerable. But you, Adaeze, you showed him the truth. Love isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to change a man like him. And then Hyejine's message, delivered via video from Switzerland, where she was still too fragile to travel. I couldn't save your father, Adaeze. That failure has haunted me for 30 years. But watching you and Ji-Hoon find each other, watching you build something beautiful from the ashes of our family's tragedy, I finally believe that redemption is possible. Not forgiveness, exactly.
But something close.
Something that feels like hope. She smiled through her tears. Welcome to our family.
Such as it is.
I have a feeling you're going to make it something better.
6 months later.
Kang Industries had stabilized. The scandal faded, replaced by admiration for Ji-Hoon's courage in exposing the corruption. The merger with Okonkwo Industries had created something stronger than either company alone, combining Korean technology with Nigerian manufacturing in ways that were already transforming the West African construction market. Dae-young was awaiting trial in Seoul, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. Emmanuel Achebe had testified and been relocated under witness protection, a compromise Adaeze still struggled with, but accepted as the price of justice. And Tabena had taken over day-to-day operations of the family company, thriving in a role he'd never expected to fill. But for Adaeze, the most important change was simpler.
She was happy.
Not the complicated, compromised happiness she'd learned to accept during the arrangement. Not the desperate hope of those early weeks when everything seemed impossible.
Real happiness.
The kind that came from waking up beside someone who knew all her flaws and loved her anyway. The kind that came from building a life together, piece by piece, argument by argument, kiss by kiss. They were sitting in the garden of the Hannock estate, their estate now, though Adaeze still sometimes forgot it was hers too, when Ji-Hoon handed her an envelope.
What's this? Open it.
Inside was a single document. A property deed for a piece of land outside Lagos.
10 acres.
Enough space for a manufacturing facility, offices, housing for employees. It's the site my father chose for the original partnership, Ji-Hoon said quietly. The one that never happened. I had my team acquire it last month. She looked at him, not understanding. The plan was always to build something there.
A joint venture.
Nigerian resources and Korean expertise, working together. My father destroyed that dream when he destroyed yours. His hand found hers. I want to rebuild it. Properly this time. With you. You want to build a company? Together. I want to build everything together. His eyes met hers, warm now, alive in a way they hadn't been when she first met him.
Companies. Families. A life. Whatever you want, Adaeze.
As long as we do it together. She looked at the deed. At the man beside her. At the future stretching out before them. Complicated, certainly, challenging, probably, but theirs.
Theirs to build.
Theirs to protect.
Theirs to love. Together, she said.
He smiled, the real smile, the one she'd worked so hard to earn, and pulled her close. And in the garden of the house that had once belonged to his grandmother, surrounded by the beauty of two cultures intertwined, Adaeze Okonkwo finally understood what her father had been trying to tell her in that unfinished letter. Some debts couldn't be repaid. Some wounds couldn't be healed. But love, real love, hard-won love, love that grew from the ashes of tragedy and blossomed anyway, love could make anything possible.
Even redemption. Even peace. Even happiness.
The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew crowds from across Lagos. The Okonkwo manufacturing complex was finally complete, a sprawling facility that combined state-of-the-art Korean technology with sustainable African practices, employing over 2,000 people from the surrounding communities. Adaeze stood at the podium, Ji-Hoon beside her, facing a sea of cameras and dignitaries and ordinary citizens who had come to witness history. "My father dreamed of something like this," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "A partnership between nations, between cultures, between people who had every reason to be enemies but chose to be something else instead."
She looked at Ji-Hoon.
He didn't live to see it. But I like to think he's watching. I like to think he knows that the dream he couldn't finish, we finished for him. Ji-Hoon stepped forward, taking the ceremonial scissors. "This facility is named for Emmanuel Okonkwo," he said. "A man I never met, but who taught me through his daughter, through his legacy, through the choices he made that rippled through decades, that integrity matters more than power. That kindness matters more than control. That love, in the end, is the only thing worth building empires for." He cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted into applause. And later, when the cameras were gone and the dignitaries had departed, Adaeze and Ji-Hoon walked through the empty facility. Their dream, their future made concrete, and stood in the main atrium, where a portrait of her father hung beside a plaque bearing his name. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. Her father, her husband, the universe that had somehow brought them together through tragedy and emerged with triumph. Ji-Hoon's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "He would be proud of you. He would be proud of us." She turned in his embrace, facing him, this man who had started as a stranger with a contract and become the love of her life. "I'm glad you signed that contract," she said. "Even though I signed it planning to use you?"
"Even though." She smiled. "Because you failed.
Spectacularly. You tried to make a business deal and ended up falling in love instead."
He kissed her forehead.
"Worst mistake of my life." "Best mistake."
"Best mistake," he agreed.
And in the building named for her father, built on land reclaimed from tragedy, surrounded by the legacy they had created together, Adaeze Okonkwo finally understood what it meant to be home.
Not a place. Not a contract. A person.
Always and only a person. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you enjoyed this Afro-Korean dark romance, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment your location, so I know my real ones were watching. And don't forget to hit the bell for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay safe, stay loved, and never give up on your happily ever after.